GamerFeed Radio.
Bet you wish you had that on camera.
Oh, dear God.
This is GamerFeed Radio. Wow. Thanks for joining us, everybody. This is our weekly video game podcast. We are not experts. We are not industry insiders. We're just four now.
I passed
Sorry,
arithmetic.
Kyle. Sorry.
That's okay because, actually it's all right because we all could have died not seeing Kyle grind his mic. I'm just saying.
Ooh. Yeah, I did do that.
Yeah.
Grind his mic. It took me a second to translate grind his mic into grind his mic.
Yeah.
I just understood. I was like, I thought you meant like he was.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, just four schmoes talking about video games.
3 schmoes.
Oh, God.
And one
I agree.
awesome person.
Yeah.
We'll
let it go. We'll let it go.
Kyle got there before I could, so it's like, well,
Anyway.
yeah. So this is episode 31. Today we're going to talk about console wars.
Don't we need to introduce ourselves?
You know what? I guess we could.
Yeah.
Because I got like a good tagline this week.
Okay. All right.
We'll go.
We'll go around the table then. I am Rob Pugh. Woo. This is Nick Delacave. Woo.
Silence.
Nothing. This will be the
Scratching
last
his
time he's silent.
Grinding
for
his
this
mic.
podcast. Also joining us, junior correspondent. No, excuse me.
Senior.
Wow,
Senior
everybody's getting
correspondent.
demoted at this table today.
We are
I
rusty.
don't exist anymore.
Wait for it. Wait for it. Brad Wallace.
Brad Wallace, that's right. Hashtag bet you wish you had that on camera. It wasn't even that good.
No,
we
what?
built it up.
See,
we built it up.
Hashtag it's the sort of thing.
Like so many things you do, you write the checks that you just can't
And it's
cash.
just like,
You make
Hashtag
such a
Nintendo
big
banana.
deal.
Hashtag Nintendo Banana. Dude, it's
Hashtag
coming.
Nintendo Banana. It's going to happen.
Already has.
But I mean, like,
It's out there. Somebody explain to me how. I mean, I'm obviously I'm the old guy here.
Kyle.
We'll get to Kyle eventually. Explain to me how.
I'm
Explain
so
me.
alone.
Shut up.
his mic in the corner.
Go sit in the corner.
With your mic.
I'm so lonely.
I'm so wrong.
Wow.
Explain briefly to Grandpa here. Explain how hashtags work. How does that? Is it just storing
Sound
metadata
like
for
my
anything
mom.
you've got?
It is
Just
a great
categorizing?
way. So basically, you create a hashtag so that people can use that hashtag in their own posts, Twitter, Facebook, some websites even, and then it aggregates a listing of all the people that have used that hashtag. So
A listing, like on is it specifically Twitter?
or
It's
Facebook,
Facebook,
does it
yeah.
as well. So
Okay.
when you click on it, anybody else who has used that hashtag for anything now appears in like a news feed, so you can see what other people are saying about the same thing.
So on last week's show, when I hashtagged beaten down hoes, that's probably not going to get a whole lot of responses.
Actually, you could be surprised. I mean, this is the Internet of Things we're talking about.
I'll have to check that out later.
Al Gore's in the back going, good. It's weird.
Good.
Why is he always
Excelsior.
come up on our podcast?
I don't know. Sponsored by Al Gore. Sponsored by global warming.
No.
Also joining us today,
Hell.
Man Bear Pig.
junior correspondent
Kyle.
Oh! Yeah!
Does that make up?
That totally made up for everything. Now I just feel like the best person here.
Well,
I am,
I
but you
want
know.
intro
hold on there.
music.
I feel bad
No,
that
Like
I don't have
WWE.
intro music.
Like,
Can we do a round of intro music?
Really, we've spent way too much time on the intro here so far today.
Yeah, we really did.
We really do need to get going.
But those folks that listen to us regularly appreciate the insanity of it all.
Well, some of them do, and then
And
every
if you're
once in a
new,
while,
Some are just like, all
And
right,
then
I'm
every-
done
Done with it.
I'm
every
done.
once in a while we get that random unlike one week.
Yeah,
and
but you
this
know,
may
we
be
never
why.
like those people.
Oh well. So
they
let's
hate us because they ain't us. That's all I've got to say.
let's get moving with what I'm sure is going to be an hour and a half podcast because
Sure.
that's as long as it possibly can be.
This is true. This rundown is like a Bible of
This is
Stuff.
in fact a crazy
prose and words.
big list.
Well, it's a big topic, so we want to make sure we get. Which I never got a chance to finish saying what it was because he got. I don't know if I sidetracked myself on that one or someone
you
else
said it.
sidetracked, but.
You said it.
Console Wars. I didn't get a
Console
chance to
Wars.
explain it though, which we'll do in a second here.
Yeah.
Before we get too far into this, we want to do a shout out here.
That's right.
We got an email this past week from, you can email us too at gamerfeedradio.com. And it's worth mentioning this is an actual legit email. This is not another...
GamerFeedRadio@gmail.com.
GamerFeedradio@gmail.com. Did I sidetrack myself there?
You did, in fact.
Okay, sorry about that. GamerFeedRadio@gmail.com. This is, in fact, an actual email. This is not another investment opportunity from Prince Mabuto Mutombo.
Which I love. That was a great...
Sovereign Republic of Nigeria.
That's a callback right there.
Yeah, I've
like
tried to
episode
keep.
6.
I've tried to keep it alive.
I like it.
But this is an actual legitimate email with feedback on the show that we wanted to talk about and give a shout out for. It comes to us from Ben Turong, who recently started listening to our show. Ben writes in saying, in part, why is there almost no coverage of PC games?
I would like to just interrupt you briefly and say that it's not a pun for the actual name of a Bearcat, which I think it could be like a fake name or a fake account.
Okay.
So just so that we're not like totally clueless, I picked up on that right away. So it's probably someone we know. But anyway, Ben. We'll refer to them as Ben.
You think it is a nom de plume?
I think it could be.
Okay.
It's awfully weird. It's a weird coincidence. Come on.
I don't know about that.
I think it is. Anyway, Ben.
Anyway, why is there almost no coverage of PC games, with the exception of 2 episodes about World of Warcraft and a few minutes about microtransactions in MapleStory? You speak as if PC games don't exist.
Which was way
I
back.
can understand if you don't have the interest or experience to go in depth, and the show is entirely based on your interests. However, you still include Xbox news and discussion, so I'm not sure that's a valid reason. Just want to take a second to respond to this. Kind of give our editorial insight into what goes on behind the scenes here. GamerFeed Radio. Speaking as our de facto programming director.
Editor-in-chief.
Well, thank you.
I mean, you are kind of, well, in all things other than
I have
your
certainly
friends.
noted that the rest of you haven't necessarily stepped up in this area.
You be quiet.
So, by default...
I'm writing.
I know, me too. I'm doing YouTube videos.
I go to Disney World sometimes.
God, I run Facebook.
I'm just saying, we have a lot of platforms. It would be nice if each one of them had a champion among the table here.
We will discuss that later.
I am the champion of the podcast.
I am decapitated now.
Yes.
I have the conch, Biggie.
So anyway, in response to Ben's email, I just want to talk about how we pick what we go into depth on the show. Ultimately, I think it comes down to we can only really talk about the things that we're actively playing. So when we're doing a save point, we're only talking about the things that we are actually playing physically that week. When we do retrospectives, which we're doing more and more nowadays because, conspicuously, the release calendar is a little bit bare until February when things kick back up again. So we're going to talk about what we actually play. So our coverage is always going to be heavy on Wii U, PS4, and 3DS. We're not journalists. We never claim to be.
No.
I don't think we have any expectation for fair and balanced coverage. It's just gonna be a mishmash, really. We do talk about Xbox One, but not in depth. Part of that comes from because our original concept for the show was to be kind of a gaming UN. The original idea was we were going to have one person from each console. I was going to be the Wii U guy, Nick was going to be the PS4 guy, and we never managed to find an Xbox One guy, which is why that kind of fell apart. But to some extent, I think we still kind of stick to that thinking a little bit. But more than that, we talk about Xbox One because you kind of can't talk about PS4 without Xbox One.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things going on in the industry, you kind of look at both of them. Wii U obviously is always off in its own little world. But because of that, Xbox One gets a little bit of coverage from us. I'll be perfectly honest with you, Xbox One gets a little bit of coverage from us because I enjoy the joke that we make about Rise of the Tomb Raider. So every time we do a noobs feed, I find some way to put some Xbox One news in there where we say, such and such whatever coming 2015 is exclusively on Xbox One, just because I enjoy that little joke.
It is fun.
But, we don't cover Xbox One really. If you think about it, we didn't say very much about Sunset Overdrive.
Nope, we didn't.
We didn't say next to anything about Halo Master Chief Collection, which was...
Other than the
it doesn't
debacles
work.
of the multiplayer.
Yeah.
I'm
So-
the only one at this table that's played it.
Yeah,
I think so.
Which is arguably a huge miss if we're covering video games in general. But I mean, it comes right back to where we are.
Yeah.
If none of us have played it, we can't really talk about it. And that's the
Well.
one of the big challenges. Well, we try not to because as much as possible, we don't
Sure.
want to be caught talking out our asses on something.
Absolutely.
So we try to, and honestly, some of the shows that I feel that have been less successful have been the ones where not everyone can effectively join in. Nothing against Brad's show, the horror game show.
I was going to talk about that one in a second.
You managed to keep it interesting, but for the most part, it was you talking at me for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And
I thought it was funny.
By virtue of the fact, well, see, that's the thing. We managed to have fun with it anyway.
Yeah.
But I couldn't really participate in the discussion on a lot of this stuff because I hadn't played a lot of the games. So it was basically Brad talking to himself.
Yeah.
Which happens quite frequently, I might add.
The last time we did,
Just put a microphone in my room.
Oh my God.
You'll get a podcast.
I don't know we'd like what we'd hear.
No.
Stop.
But the second World of Warcraft podcast that we did, where we did Warlords of Draenor, Tony and I had a great discussion. Nick, I felt so bad for you just sitting there because you just couldn't.
Yeah, but
you're sitting there checking your phone, and I felt so bad that we couldn't include you in the discussion.
And I think that's okay.
So,
though. But I think
from an editorial standpoint, that's where I'm coming from nowadays when we're trying to program these shows. And since Kyle's come on board in the last month, again, the release calendar being relatively sparse, I'm also going for retro games pointedly because I recognize that Kyle doesn't have a current-gen console. So in order to get him involved in the conversation, we're doing things like today's episode where we're talking all about Sega, next week's episode where we're talking all about platformers. That's an attempt on my part to bring Kyle more into the discussion so he can participate more.
But I will say, my computer is in the shop right now getting kind of cleaned up, so it will start working well again. And I am a devout player of Knights of the Old Republic, and I plan on getting Final Fantasy 14 for my PC as well very soon.
Yeah, we talked about that.
I could contribute to the PC. I can shout out to the PC crowd a little bit. I'm a little bit into that these days because that's my best way to get into newer games.
Well, and I think the big thing, Rob, though, is that it's all about growing pains. I think what you're describing is we're getting into a much larger audience now who has more diverse tastes and
which
views,
is awesome.
Which is very awesome. And so I think the
Thank you
fact
for
that
listening.
we're getting that feedback means that we have to obviously recognize it and be able to at least dabble in that which we aren't total experts on. But it's
Absolutely.
partly an excuse right now, but it won't be going into the future. So I think it's valid.
So, I mean, just to say where we are, that's kind of where we're coming from. Our coverage is always going to be heavy on Wii U, PS4, and 3DS. We try to dabble in other areas, but it's mainly in terms of collection shows where we're talking about we can talk about this because one person knows something about it, but we've also got topics that everybody else knows something about on that show too. So we can kind of pass things around as opposed to having a full topic that nobody really knows much about. Which is ultimately where we're coming from with PC because none of us can really speak authoritatively on it.
Well,
but we're going to
three of you can't.
Well, we're going to take a crack at it anyway.
Well,
so,
Kyle's kind of in my camp.
To Ben, if
trying.
that's your real name, for what it's worth, I think it is. I'm not as distrustful as Nick is. But if it is a pseudonym, that would be interesting. I'd be curious if you'd be willing to come forward with the real name.
Deep Throat.
But whatever the case. Thanks.
Just call me
Watergate. Nixon, come on, get out of here.
Why is it always so...
That's not inappropriate. That's American history.
But coming out of your
to
mouth...
narrate. I just threw a pen at Brad.
Can I continue speaking,
Yes,
please?
There's nothing inappropriate about that. There's nothing inappropriate.
I'm trying to address one of our listeners here.
Yes,
This is true.
It's legit.
So, Ben,
I have something to say, too.
Fan service.
I'm going to punch you in the damn face. Okay.
In the face.
Now, this is the part where everybody gets to participate because I'm going to be dropping some bombs on you guys that you're hearing for the first time as far as future programming goes. So hopefully, Nick, come back to us.
I'm here.
All right.
I'm here.
So, Ben, genuinely, we do thank you for your feedback. We are going to take the criticism to heart.
Yep.
I have some, obviously we're trying to be careful not to be talking out of our asses here. So, but we are going to, I have programmed some things coming up that we're going to try to address your criticisms. First off, I have, and these are just some ideas that I'm throwing around. I haven't actually done up agendas for the shows yet, but we're going to do a Star Wars show where we're going to talk a lot of KOTOR. We're going to have Tony on for that, hopefully. I need to get him taken care of. Hopefully it'll be sufficiently far enough in the future that he can run away from home for a night and not, cause too much drama.
Yes.
Nikki's got to be getting close by now.
Very, very close.
Yeah. soon-to-be new daddy, Tony.
Yes.
So we're going to talk. We'll have KOTOR on that show. Probably something like X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, some of the old-school PC things
And
in there as well.
The MMO, Old Republic.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to do a Minecraft show. Obviously, one of the bigger things going on PC right now. That's going to be a challenge because, like we talked about, I think I'm the only one here that actually plays it. But I think what we're going to try for that is I think we're going to try that as a Let's Play.
Yeah.
So it'll be everybody sitting down watching me while I play, and perhaps asking questions and this is what's going on and all that, and doing the off-topic random crap that we do anyway too.
I love that.
I would like to do Let's Plays.
That would be fun.
So I think I've got it figured out how we can do that relatively effectively. Still get the good audio for the podcast and make it all work.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we'll try that out in the coming weeks. I want to do an RTS show where we can hit on things like the original Warcraft game, StarCraft, obviously, which is huge in the competitive circuit.
So good.
Fire Emblem, of which there's things to talk about in the future. And actually, that might be a good thing, too. If the Fire Emblem release...
Maybe a little
for
Advance
3DS.
Wars.
I actually know
Advanced
somebody
Wars
who's
as well.
semi-pro in StarCraft.
Okay.
Best game ever.
Can we get
Who
him on
will
the show?
totally legit come.
Okay.
Totally legit.
Cool. So will help out, too.
Okay, good.
I was contemplating doing a Twitch show, just show on Twitch, but honestly, that's just the barest kernel of an idea. I also had a couple of other shows that have already been on the agenda for a while now that we just haven't gotten around to, but do go into PC gaming a little bit. A multiplayer show, which has been... the agenda's been finalized for like 3 or 4 months now. That we just haven't actually done the show, mainly because we're trying to get Ben Walls on the show.
Yeah.
Which we need to try again, Nick. Reach out and touch.
I'll reach out.
Gently.
Reach out and
Gently.
touch faith.
Wow.
But a multiplayer show which will go into things like MUDs, LAN parties, things like that. Again, old school stuff. An FPS show of which one of the main topics is Doom, which I loved playing on PC back in the day. That was kind of the end of my PC gaming stint. But yeah, so we're going to try to incorporate PC more into shows. But I got to be perfectly honest with you. If you're really looking for PC coverage, I don't know if we're ever going to really get there. Like if you're hardcore into PC, I'm not sure we're ultimately the podcast for you. You may want to go find a second podcast to listen to on a weekly basis.
Emphasis on a second.
Second. We love you. Don't go away. But we can't be what we're not. But we're going to try. We're going to make overtures.
Come on, baby. I'm sorry.
Waiting for it.
Red baby beefcake.
Come
Okay.
back, baby. Come on, baby.
So that's Ben's email.
All right.
Did you
I
have
was
a
gonna,
thought?
yeah, I was gonna say, don't we have a PC game show coming up in 2 weeks?
We do, actually.
do.
and that's-
One of the people at the table here is an avid PC gamer. His name is Brad Wallace.
Otherwise,
I
known as
don't
Red
believe
baby
you.
beefcakes.
I do.
I'm
My
not sure I
Steam
buy
account.
that.
Yeah, I don't believe
Okay.
you at all,
You guys
actually.
can add me on Steam. Brad's back.
Oh,
Or
unfortunately.
Wallabies.
Oh, yeah. I forget Steam's a thing all the time.
Yeah, so I got, as I
As
alluded
As Ben
to
pointed out in
part.
his email.
in the horror game show, Amnesia, Slender, Outlast.
Okay.
A lot of these first-person
Five
horror
Nights at
games
Freddy's.
I play. Also, I've played Counter-Strike Go for dozens of hours. I've played Dota 2. I've played all of Valve's first-party games, Half-Life, Portal, you name it. I'm very well suited in the PC gaming room.
He's dropping his cred.
I'm just saying, one of us does play.
Well, he
lot
never
of
got a
PC
chance to
games.
because he wasn't here on episode 2.
That's true.
So
But I do understand that if you guys are not all PC
shout out to
gamers, then
2014
obviously,
there. Holla.
Obviously,
So
we will not be
long
talking
ago.
about it so
So
much.
Brad's putting together a PC show that'll be coming up in 3 weeks. 3 weeks.
Yeah,
3 weeks?
It's
3 weeks.
Yeah.
I said 2 weeks.
Yeah,
It's
three.
3 weeks. February 5th. Look out for it.
Okay.
February 5 show.
All right. As much as I'm reticent to let Brad talk for any extended period of time, it's time to check in at the save point.
Wow.
That's right.
Brad's going to talk at us today,
That's right.
Oh, no.
hopefully for
It's
no
like every
longer than
show.
like 10 minutes.
Ish.
Yeah.
But Brad's going to
5 would
talk
be
at
nice.
us.
We're timing you.
I've been playing the game Alien Isolation on the Sony PlayStation 4 computer
Entertainment
console.
system?
Software. Yeah. It's extremely good. It's
Nailed
actually published by the company that we're going to be talking about, Sega, since they've moved into third-party software.
Which is why this is on this show.
It's. I mean,
you act like that was like a recent thing.
I'm just saying. I'm just
not
saying.
recent.
It's
Well,
not a recent thing.
it Yeah, we originally had him slated to talk about it on the show back in October, but he didn't have the money to go get it.
Oh
then.
no, I was talking about like Sega as a third-party developer.
Oh, sorry.
It is
Missed
about
that
12
connection.
years in the happening.
The
But anyway,
Dreamcast has been dead for a while.
as listeners of GamerFeed Radio would know, I am a fan of the first-person horror subgenre, where you're survival horror. It's not action, shooty, death, killing. It's very much running away, trying not to be killed by the invincible alien.
Running. Fireball.
The game is actually absolutely phenomenal. It's my PS4 retail game of the year. I still think PT is my favorite thing of the year, especially on PS4 because it's
Thing, that's
exclusive.
so descriptive.
Well, because it's not a game; it's a demo,
It's
it's
a
a
thing.
teaser,
Yeah.
it's whatever. But as far as actual things
to
you can go
admit
to
that, like,
Walmart
2
and
episodes
buy,
later.
I'm just saying, things you actually buy in a store on the PlayStation Network. Alien Isolation is my favorite PlayStation game. It's terrifying. First of all, you're hiding in lockers from this alien. Like I said, you can't kill the alien, so all you can do is run away and try to distract it. And you're throwing flares to try to get it to go away. The story is actually really, really good. I'm a big Alien fan. I love the first Ridley Scott movie. I love the James Cameron sequel. And this is actually a perfect intro.
And that's it. You notice he doesn't continue
Yeah, I
from
don't
there.
continue. That's what I was about to say. My new mental trilogy of the Alien series is going to be Alien, Alien Isolation, Aliens.
All right.
So it fits perfectly in between. I don't want to spoil anything. I'm like 80% way through the game. I think I'm like chapter 15 out of 18 or something like that. But the story is just, it keeps getting better and better. I can see where it got some flack, where it being frustrating. Because the alien's invincible, you can't permanently get it to go away in any way, so all you can do is run and hide. That gets a little frustrating because you'll be right next to your goal, and it'll just come out of nowhere and zap you in the head, and it's not fun. It's really gory. It's really violent.
As expected.
If you're into that thing or not into that thing, it's worth noting that it is pretty gruesome in some scenes. But absolutely, though, I recommend it. It's most similar, I would say, if I had to compare it to one game, say it's similar to BioShock in that you're on this space station, it's abandoned, and a lot of the themes are similar in that there's all these people that go crazy because it's abandoned. There's all these looters. But it's also very similar to the games I was just talking about, first-person horror games like Outlast and Slender, where you're mostly running, you're not fighting. But, I love it. And the graphics are phenomenal. One of the best-looking games I've ever seen.
Huh.
Highly, 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 highly recommended.
Cool.
From Brad. Very good. Very good game.
Thank you for telling us your recommendation in the third person.
You're welcome. Brad, highly recommend.
I'm very impressed you only spent 2 minutes on that.
I'm just saying, you guys are going to give me shit, then I'm not going to talk about it.
Wow.
For what it's worth,
I'm
Brad,
Hashtag for what it's worth.
We can peek at that.
the highly observant may have noticed when they walked in here today.
And we just did.
Oh my God.
God.
The highly observant may have noted when they walked in here today that I have a list of upcoming show ideas on the board there, one of which is Metal Gear Solid. So we're gonna
I want to skip that.
I
one.
can actually contribute.
we're gonna let you go nuts all over that,
Oh, God, it's going to be glorious.
hoping to time it near the release of Phantom Pain.
Whenever it does come out.
Yeah,
Which maybe summer, maybe fall, maybe next year, maybe never, because it's Kojima, and these games get delayed quite often.
but I mean it's got to be shaping up pretty well at this point.
Yeah. I'd expect, if I had to put a season on it, I'd say summer 2015.
So just to make the point, we you know we beat on Brad, but we
true.
love nonetheless.
Yes.
For some unknown reason.
Like I said, it's an abusive relationship. You guys keep inviting me back.
No, we are not like Destiny.
Yeah.
That's
Baby
different.
beefcake.
That's a
Baby
different
beefcake.
kind of abuse.
I love you, baby. Come back. Love it. Love it.
All right, let's move on, shall we?
We shall.
It's time for the feature presentation. This week, we're talking about console wars. Specifically, the book. This is GamerFeed Radio Book Club today. I am the only one that's actually read the book, as far as I know.
That makes you Oprah?
Sort of.
First book club.
So, but we're gonna talk through.
Half the audience just stopped playing the show.
Oh, thanks, Nick. So, but we're gonna talk through the basic framework of the book. We're gonna talk through the history of primarily Sega, but a little bit of Nintendo in there too. During the early '90s, during the console wars, or the first major console war, the first great console war, however that works out.
Yeah.
So yeah, Hopefully we can do it in an hour or less, because that's about the amount of time we got left on the podcast.
Yep.
We got it.
Okay, so Console Wars is it's a book came out last year by a guy named Blake Harris. Basically, and it's going to be turned into a movie before too much longer by Seth Rogen and Evan
Goldberg. We think we've talked about that movie like at least 5 times.
We've mentioned it before.
Shows. Which I'm really excited for.
I'm not sure how that's
awesome.
going to play as a movie. I'm just curious to see how...
Sabotage and intrigue.
Make it like the social network
Probably.
of video games, yeah.
Probably. I mean, it'll be
Hopefully more
interesting to
I
entertaining.
see.
can kind of see it. I can kind of see it them approaching it kind of satirically. Like,
Right, because it's obviously they're 2 funny directors. They've made the interview,
Right.
and this is the end. And this will be presumably their 3rd movie. I don't think they've announced anything else. I think this is next on their slate, quote unquote. But yeah, I don't see
I thought
them
Evan
being.
Goldberg and Seth Rogen been working for like a long
Well,
time.
they've been but as a director duo that have
Oh,
tackled
okay.
like specifically, yeah.
Right, I gotcha.
No, but they've worked on at least like 10 movies or something crazy like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, I wonder. It's probably going to be lighthearted and more funny, but it's hard to
Yeah.
imagine because it's this corporate warfare almost, to where these 2 really competitive
Yeah.
giants are at each other's throats.
But
I think they're both
it's
avid
nerdy.
gamers, which is
Yeah, they are.
They know the source. They probably grew up.
Yeah.
They're not terribly old. They probably grew up through the console wars. So
probably.
Yep.
yeah.
So, Console Wars is essentially boils down to being the story of Tom Kalinske and his time as president of Sega of America. Basically, it's a 5 or 6 year detour in the middle of vacations for him. It's like he just kind of gets swept away to this crazy other world, and he ends back where he started. But he was formerly an executive at Leapfrog and then at Mattel. He was involved in creating the He-Man brand and all the different varieties of Barbies. He was, credited for coming up with the idea of let's have a Malibu Barbie, let's have a, all that.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
the only
the
one I
different-
know since I didn't actually
It's
play with Barbies as a
Malibu.
kid. But
Sure, Rob.
but it's like, hey, let's make all of these different ones. So he kind of came from a toy background when he was recruited to come to Sega of America. Spent some time looking around the company, came up with a 4-point plan as to what he felt they needed to do if they were going to take on Nintendo seriously in the game industry. First of all, it needed to be about games. They need a better pack-in with the system, with the Genesis, than Altered Beast. He felt that, number 2, they needed to make up some ground on price. They needed to take a loss to be able to get in the door. So he eventually recommended that they drop the price to $149. Number 3, marketing. Nintendo gets the kids, Sega gets everybody else. So he wanted to start pioneering some edgy ads and try to get the teen market. And 4th, he wanted to focus on development. If they were going to sell this in America, they needed to develop for America. So SOA needed some input on localizing games if this was going to work. The board of Sega of Japan was kind of furious with him after this bold presentation that he made to them. But Sega president Nakayama gave him the go-ahead, and that kind of started his kind of whirlwind tour of taking Genesis to the top.
But if you think about it, that's really the goal of every company, right?
Yeah.
Is to start them young, get them hooked, and let them be a customer for life.
That's how it works for cigarettes.
And but without the come on,
Cigarettes and
Hey,
games.
Sorry.
without
Sorry.
but no, but
Ouch.
I think but that's where Nintendo has consistently been. I mean, everybody
Fearless,
who's
yeah.
ever played a video game knows what Nintendo is, has played their original titles, goes back and does the retro stuff, because when they were kids, fond memories, and now those people are the grown-ups, and they're making games and running companies and indie development and all that other stuff. So, I mean, if you really think about it, no offense to Genesis, I was a Sega Genesis owner, I get it, is that, by skipping the kid, quote, kid, they missed out, I think, on some goodwill that would have lasted them a lot longer as an institution.
Absolutely.
But are they skipping the kids, though?
Teenagers are not kids.
Well, see, that's the thing, though,
They're
is
not.
that it's in a certain way. I think it's fairly crafty because you're marketing, you're aiming for the teens, what's the first thing that the preteens want? Whatever the teens are playing. So you start creeping lower and lower, and you start eating into Nintendo's market.
That's true.
Too.
Yeah, but
That's a good way to
but
put
it didn't happen. No, not to spoiler alert or anything.
Spoiler alert.
But
Sega
I mean,
does
look.
not
But I
win.
mean, but but the problem with that is right. The problem with that strategy. You're talking to the business guy here.
Poor Sega.
Is that it was like the after rant, the also rant. I'm going to go after the next thing, and those kids didn't have anything really to draw from necessarily. If you were a teenager, you were playing Super Mario World, you were playing Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. I mean, you were already in that universe. So by offering competition at that point, you're going against years of goodwill. You know, the guys that basically saved the industry, like we talked about last year, and started producing really good quality games. So there was natural suspicion, I think. And frankly, if I'm an 8-year-old and I want something, my parents are going to buy it for me. And when I'm a teenager, they're less likely to buy it for me because I'm a pain in their butt.
Yeah.
You get a job at like a fast food restaurant.
I'm going to
You're a
buy my
teenager.
kid the Nintendo
that's
system.
That's how you get your.
I mean, look at why 3DS is so successful. And then I'm not going to buy him the Xbox because I don't want to play on that, bloody gory stuff or whatever.
Sure.
I don't know. I just being a
Sega
parent,
does
that's how I think.
what Nintendo don't is
Boom.
boom.
Get a little ahead of ourselves here, Brad.
Just a little bit.
That's okay.
Well, we talk about marketing.
We'll get to it's marketing.
Edgy,
It's legit.
edgy kids. I
Marketing
believe that
is
is the
my major.
third point on the
Just
4-point
saying.
plan.
Okay.
Yes.
So, continuing the journey here. Once Tom kind of, or I should say Mr. Kalinske, President Kalinske,
We know
Sega
Tom.
America,
Tom, buddy.
whichever.
Come back, baby.
So, as he's settling into the job, he's got some other issues he needs to deal with from where the state of things were going into it. So, at this point, if you were developing for Nintendo, if you were developing games for Nintendo, 30% of your revenue straight went to Nintendo. You had a license to create games that would give you the ability to make 5 games per year. You had to buy your cartridges straight from Nintendo. So a lot of publishers, didn't really care for this arrangement, but they didn't have a whole lot of choice because Nintendo was the only real game in town up to this point. A company called Tengen comes along, and they found a way around the lockout programming, which was called 10NES, which was what restricted the NES's ability to play anything that wasn't a Nintendo-made cartridge.
It's the modern day equivalent of DRM, basically.
Basically, yeah. So they came out with this rabbit chip, which allowed them to work around it, and they could make their own games. The way they got here, interestingly enough, they filed a fake copyright infringement lawsuit against Nintendo, which basically gives them the right, since they're saying Nintendo infringed on some imaginary copyright of theirs. Just filing that document means they get to go through and take a look at Nintendo's copyrights to help start building the case and see if, in fact, there has been an infringement. So basically, they get free reign to go look through Nintendo stuff and figure out how it is that what they need to do to accomplish what they need to do to get around the 10NES programming. So they got all the documents through the Copyright Office through a fake lawsuit.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So at this point, Tengen's able to make their own games. They cut Nintendo out entirely with the retailers. Nintendo says, okay, retailers, it's us or them. How do you want this to go down? So Tengen immediately gets dumped by all the retailers and, the little cherry on top, sued by Nintendo.
Jeez. Genius.
So things didn't work out too well for Tengen. So Tengen kind of became not a dirty word, but kind of like a little bit of taboo
It
there
does kind of sound dirty.
among the developers.
Tengen.
Just had to say it. I knew you were going to.
So this all goes to set up, Tom Kalinske comes into the job. He's trying to get Sega Genesis on shelves because people can't buy it if it's not actually on shelves. Most people are sticking with, filling their, as we've talked about on the show previously about, retail space being at a premium for things like Amiibos.
Oh, yeah.
You got to do some wheeling and dealing and able to get this out on shelves in order for people to be able to buy it. So he goes to Walmart thinking that Walmart's the big retailer. If we can get them in line, everybody else will fall in line too. Walmart passed on carrying Genesis for basically the same reason, because we don't want this to come down to an ultimatum from Nintendo saying it's us or them. So we're going to go with them. Thanks. See ya. Love ya. Bye. So
Not gonna lie, Nintendo kind of sounds like an ass right now.
well,
I mean, they had They were the market leader. They
it's
were
practically
basically
a
a
monopoly.
monopoly, and so that's the card they were playing.
Wow.
And having worked for Monopoly in a former life, I can tell you that it's all rainbows and butterflies when you're the one carrying the vast majority of market share. But the minute that starts to slip, people start to negotiate very quickly.
Yeah.
So.
And which turned out to be the case eventually down the line, which isn't on the agenda, so we're not we're not jumping ahead. But eventually,
But we are, but we're not.
Walmart did break down. One of the things that got them that got them eventually to break down was, and this was just an interesting little idea Kalinsky had on his way out of town from meeting with Walmart president. He came up with the idea for Sega Town. Basically, on his way out from Walmart headquarters, he passed this retail space, and he's like, okay, there's an empty retail space there. If people can't come to Walmart to get Sega Genesis, I'm going to rent out this space. I'm going to put Genesis in there. Kids can come, and there'll be all sorts of stuff on the windows. People will drive by. They'll come in. They can play for free here, right within sight of Walmart's headquarters, where they can't get the same thing. So the idea was that the Walmart employees have to pass that every day and see this thing that people can't get in their stores that people really want. And eventually that arguably helped wear down. But, it also helped that once Sega started building some market share, too, to where they're like, okay, I give up.
Hence Sega World at Walt Disney World in Florida.
Is there a Sega World?
There used to be. It was amazing. I was there. It was at Epcot.
Oh, I do remember that.
And
I remember playing like the Pocahontas Genesis game. Oh
Unreal.
my god, that's weird.
You could play all
Blast
the
from
Sega
the
games
past.
at Sega World at Epcot. It's not there anymore, but that was all part of the future, tomorrow, and all that.
Wow.
All right.
That was a blast.
Yes,
from
I'm
the
that
past.
old.
Whoa.
I try real hard
remember.
to help. So any of you are out there going, dude, I totally remember that, you better keep listening. It gets better. I'm just saying.
So also in the same time period, EA, Electronic Arts,
Our favorite people. Nope.
Oh,
Well,
boy.
business practices being what they are,
That is no excuse for crap.
they reverse engineered Genesis carts because they wanted a better deal. So they eventually got all sorts of misspellings in this thing. Anyway,
My God.
they met with Kalinsky. He eventually offered them a better deal
Check it, baby.
to stop them from going the Tengen route. Where he was willing to offer them 60% cheaper carts. They could self-manufacture them. They get up to 16 games a year. And he also negotiated the Madden engine for them to use for Joe Montana Football, which was Sega's own football franchise at the time. So these are just some of the corporate politics going on at the time on a young up-and-coming Sega Genesis here in the States. So my question for the panel, who do you feel for here? The razors or the blades in this case? The consoles or the games? Because all of these developers are trying to make these games under these restrictive licenses. But by the same token, and this was the argument that Kalinsky had with the EA president at the time, whose name I don't recall. Hey, we spend thousands of dollars a year making games for your console. Well, hey, we spent millions of dollars on the consoles to sell your games. So who do you feel for here?
I feel bad for the game makers.
Okay.
I mean, that's a steep bargain. I mean, I don't know, 30% and these limited 5 games a year and all this stuff. I don't know. Especially with Nintendo. Nintendo's notorious about that.
Yeah,
but as far as Sega goes, they've obviously loosened it up, like you said. But I mean, compared to now, where you can put a game on the internet for nothing, I mean, it's hard to sympathize with the console makers that have such restrictions on their stuff.
But if you think about it, though, it by today's standards, it is crazy. But if you really think about it, it's like I created this product that I'm trying to sell, and you people get the benefit of using my stuff, but you got to follow my rules.
Yeah.
That's like, if you take it in today's terms, that's people's main beef with Apple.
I was just about to compare it to the
You
App Store,
control
it's the same percent, 30% of your
everything.
Yeah,
so all Apple did was take a cue from Nintendo and said, well, if it worked for them in the 80s, it'll work for us today. And people are still stupid enough to pay for all that when 90% of it can get found for free somewhere, or you can do a super cheap subscription service. But, that didn't exist back then, I'm just saying. But that's people's beef. So if you're an Android user, you're like, well, I don't like Apple because they forced this monetization scheme on me. And if I go Google, it's more openware, quote, although they are starting to lock it down more, but I have more freedom. So that's interesting business practice.
Not to mention, actually, the parallels are there. Nintendo, they obviously they're trying to prevent piracy, That's a lot of it is preventing piracy, like you said, the NES chips or whatever. With Apple, you don't get rampant piracy. You get some jailbreaking or whatever. But on Android, I mean, hell, you could literally download every single thing on the Google Store for free.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for publishers to want to go to the more controlled system in that case.
Yeah.
But as we're seeing now with Nintendo, sometimes their restrictions bite them in the butt. Now nobody wants to play ball with Nintendo, and they make their own games, and nobody wants to come
And
play.
on the flip side, they're also the only publisher with quality, and all the other publishers are like, I'm going to do my own thing, and their games suck.
Right, and even going back to like the Atari crash and all that, that's the reason Atari crashed, is there was no quality control. Anyone could just put ET on a cartridge and it was god-awful.
And that was 100% the reason why Nintendo had all of these policies,
totally,
the inventory shorting, all of that stuff came out of trying to prevent the crash from happening again.
Totally.
Yeah.
They felt...
And it was predicted. I mean, over and over. Oh my God, it's going to end.
They felt 100% responsible for keeping the industry out of going through that again.
And they were 100% responsible, but yeah.
Yep, and still kind of are in a way.
Yeah,
They may be the only ones. They're going to be the cockroach left after the nuclear meltdown, I'm telling you.
I actually,
you really think it's gonna happen again?
actually
I
believe
do.
that. I
think it's going to melt.
that.
I think the people are going to revolt, and gamers are going to go, all right, I'm done. I'm tired of spending money on crap. I'm telling you, I think
I'm
it's gonna
tired of season passes where half the game's locked out in the pre-order
I
bonus.
know.
And
That's one reason why I am
you
not
play.
jealous of you guys right now for like having a lowly console.
No, I mean, legit,
Like-
dude. Totally.
Even
You know,
Alien
I'll-
Isolation, they have freaking a season pass for a single-player story-based game, and you play all these bonus missions that are like $7 to $10 a piece. Otherwise.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
It sucks.
I don't have to pay anything to play Persona or Final Fantasy on my old console.
And we're going to talk
I
about
don't-
that, and we're going to talk about online-ish stuff with DLC. We're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
I kind of have to give a shout though for Square Enix for releasing their games in like the purest form. Usually, like there's not a bunch of crazy DLC or season passes for their games. They just release the game, and then you can download like costumes and crap for your
Sure.
But other than that, you're just getting pretty much the full game. And I respect that to kind of going against the mold.
Do you think that's a function of it being a Japanese company?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Interesting.
I think they've tried to be more Western. They have like non-RPG stuff, especially.
Right. Well, Tomb Raider. And,
Yeah, Tomb Raider is one. There's another one called Sleeping Dogs, I think. It's like this Chinese open world
But
game.
at the
or
same
something.
time, they have
Thief.
Life is Strange,
Yeah,
which
Thief.
looks super Japanese and super
Yeah.
anime, and it looks I think it looks awesome. And but yeah,
RPGs actually, just as a genre, I think they're kind of immune from season pass DLC nonsense.
yeah, definitely.
Other than like MMORPGs, which have expansion packs at this.
right. I mean, even stuff like Fallout that has a bunch of DLC, but you still got a full game, and then there's just like, hey, you want more? Here's basically another chapter that you can play for the entire game.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
The problem is when it doesn't feel like a complete game, and then you're adding more onto it, like in Fallout. It
Right.
feels like you're getting part of the game, and you're adding up to the complete game. Like that's what, especially with Evolve now, they just announced that like
I totally
the
just
fourth,
got beta access to that.
really the
I
fourth
just
monster.
got
There's 4 monsters. The fourth one you have to pay $15 for.
Yeah.
and it's a pre-order bonus.
That's
you only get it if you
ridiculous.
pre-order the game. It's so stupid. I mean,
See, and that's the kind of crap.
that's how you douse the fire of hype on your.
And then
new
you're
IP
like, hey, I'm
and
going to go
all
play
this stuff.
Smash
yeah,
Brothers.
because you all
Peace.
were freaking out about that
Yeah,
game.
and they
You're
just-
like, Kyle, when you
not-
get a PS4, get this game. We'll all play it
I'm
together.
not paying $75 to get a $60 game.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Value wise.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
let's move on, shall we?
Next
Yes.
section.
All right, this is going to be the hot topic.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Sega
yeah.
on their way. If they're going to go to the top, they need a mascot that'll be able to take on Mario.
And this was a thing in the 80s, so don't hate.
So Sonic the Hedgehog was born. Sonic was a product of a design. Shush,
Why, Sonic?
shush. You get your chance later.
I know I will.
Sonic was a product of a design competition at Sega of Japan. It was originally called Needle Mouse.
Oh my God.
The original, the initial
compete with
design.
Mickey.
The initial design was described by the American team as villainous and crude. It had sharp fangs, a spiked collar, an electric guitar, and a big-boobed girlfriend named Madonna.
So basically, modern Sonic.
Right. Yeah.
You got the werewolf, you got the Amy, you got the guitar.
You have an actual human girl in
Oh God!
Sonic 06.
2006.
That was freaky.
So
Glad I'm not a Sonic.
they've got Sega of Japan has this concept. They fax it over to America. Sega of America takes a look at it and says, "No, we can't do this. We can't sell this." So Kalinsky takes his execs on a trip. They are going to visit some other icons to get some inspiration for what they need to do with this design if they're going to redesign it. So they go to Toys R Us. And Kalinske, who came from Mattel, walks them through the toy store, and they take a look at some of the other iconic characters like Mickey and G.I. Joe and He-Man and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Mr. Potato Head, things like that.
Again, 80s.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
a good
says,
time.
if we're going to create an icon that kids are going to want to be, they're basically hang out with. They want to play the game. They're going to hang out with this icon. We need to start thinking along these lines of what these characters have in common. So in their redesign, they focused on backstory and character. They worked to try to give him some sort of attitude, just to differentiate from a little Italian plumber. He was to represent the spirit of Sega of America, who was an underdog speeding through obstacles as they saw it. They brought together some concepts like Kurt Cobain's whatever attitude, Michael Jordan's graceful arrogance, and Bill Clinton's get it done demeanor. All this is quoted directly from the book. This is not me making this up.
Thank you for saying that.
Right.
The book.
But these are the sort of influences that they were looking for in the redesign. So they take off the sharp fangs, they take off the spike collar, they kick the girlfriend. They redesign him so he looks a little bit more friendlier, and then they tone him down so much that he almost looks like what I always hear about Sonic. The design is that he kind of comes from Felix the cat on Mickey's body.
Okay, yeah.
So eventually they kind of end in this kind
Clever.
of more favorable place, and they add a little bit of attitude back into, and they have this idea and they take it back to Japan. So Japan, of course, wants to stick with their original idea. Sega of Japan, I should say, not the entire country. So this starts to cause between this and between the 4-point plan that Kalinske rolls out to the Sega board. There's a little bit of friction starting to build up between the American side of the company and the Japanese side of the company. So this starts to cause
that sounds familiar.
This starts to cause this big rift between Sega of America and Sega of Japan. Japan wants to revert completely to the original design. They suggested a compromise. What if each region got their own Sonic? And they said they suggested that Mickey's not the same all over the world, which some of the execs at Sega of America didn't quite agree with. They're like, well, no, Mickey is Mickey.
Yes.
There might be some subtle changes, but ultimately it's the same character. It has to be if it's going to be an international icon. Eventually, Sega of America won out, mainly due to President Nakayama backing Kalinske's call on it. And Sonic the Hedgehog was born. I'm just going to leave us open here to Kyle talking about Sonic for a little bit.
Wow.
You realize at some point we have to start paying for that music.
Oh.
That's why we use very generic music at the start of each show.
I apologize
That's
for
all
that.
right.
Very generic.
So,
Hilarious.
Tell us about Sonic. What are your, give us your childhood memories here, Kyle, as the Sonic fan at the table.
well, when I was a wee lad of 6 years old, I had a Super Nintendo, and I was walking through the store with my mother, and I saw the Sega Genesis, and I saw on the front of the box Sonic the Hedgehog 2 included into the
with the game
system.
Yep.
And I just looked at Sonic. I was like, "That's weird." The fact that he was like most of the games I played didn't really have because I played like Mario and stuff like that. They had human protagonists, so it was the first time. It was the first time I really ever saw like an animal with a personality, and I thought that was really cool. And and so I got eventually I was able to get the game. I believe it was Christmas that year.
Yeah, I got it for Christmas too.
I got the Genesis with the Sonic. It came with Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and I think I also got. This was pretty late in the Sega Genesis lifespan.
Yeah, I got it.
So I think I also got Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles with it, and
Sonic and Knuckles.
That's my favorite game in the series.
Azure Lake or whatever.
Michael Jackson made the soundtrack. That's sweet.
It's true.
So I played Sonic 2, and
I love Sonic 2.
You know what? It looked very smooth. It was visually. I think the Genesis kind of won up Nintendo a little bit on the Genesis, even the Super Nintendo. I know late in the Super Nintendo's lifespan, obviously we got better looking games like Super Mario RPG and Donkey Kong Country and stuff like that. But compared to like Mario World, like the scenery was way more detailed.
I agree.
Very, very, very vivid.
God, I agree.
And you're just going fast through these frames and frames of scenery, and then at the end of the level, you see this fat man come down in a helicopter and goes into this giant drill machine. I'm like, oh, this is new.
Yeah.
And, it's a very easy boss, but at the same time, it's like, this guy is building crazy machines, and he's not Bowser, and he's got these crazy machines, and you're a kid, that stuff's cool. Like, that stuff's really cool.
Which actually is really interesting, because now that you're saying that, I just realized that in Nintendo and Sega, the roles are switched. You have a human fighting a dinosaur, and then in Sonic, you have a hedgehog fighting a fat guy.
Right.
Which kind of, in essence, is really the same
fun
thing.
Fun fact, Dr. Eggman was designed...
Robotnik, for those of us who are purists.
Robotnik. Actually, I hate calling him Dr. Eggman.
Yep, I agree.
When was that a good idea?
I don't
when
know.
did Sega thought that was a good idea?
Idiots.
More about that later, though. Next week, folks. But Dr. Eggman was based on Mario.
Yeah.
His design was based on Mario. And actually, he was originally intended to be Sega's mascot. He had a Teddy Roosevelt kind of look to him. But he was a fat man with a mustache. Sounds familiar? Yes. And of course, obviously, Sega was like, whoa, like, we'll get sued for this,
Yep.
So, but they still liked the design of the characters, so they eventually worked him to a villain. That's how Dr. Robotnik was born. And so that's just basically history. I played through Sonic 2. I beat it.
Yep.
Beat it in like 3 days, I think, because I just couldn't put it down. And it's not a very long game. That's one thing Mario kind of has over Sonic is Mario games are bigger in scope because Sonic games are just linear.
You just run.
You just
you
run
go
through,
so fast.
You run through stuff.
Yeah.
And sure, there's challenge, sure, there's difficulty, but and there's some secrets here and there. But Mario World, you have 2 whole worlds that they can randomly find just from exploring the game.
Yep.
And Sonic didn't really have that. He had bonus stages and Chaos Emeralds.
I love the half pipe too.
True. True. Good stuff.
Alrighty, so Sega, armed with a new mascot, starts taking the war to Nintendo. Meanwhile, Nintendo's working on their next system. Because they're still on the NES at this point. This is 91.
Yeah.
So they're concerned about backward compatibility. Nintendo's set to roll out the Super Famicom. Or no, I'm a little bit ahead of myself. This is late 90 when they're rolling out the Super Famicom.
Yeah. Super Nintendo came out first, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
No, over the Genesis, no.
Super Nintendo came out in 90.
Genesis was already out.
Genesis was out in 91.
I think.
No.
I thought it was 91. Okay, I was wrong. My bad. Continue.
So Nintendo's set to roll out the Super Famicom in late 90s. Sega forced their hand because they started taking some market share.
Yep.
Retailers started taking pre-orders, and let's save the rage here for perhaps a DLC or something, but retailers started taking pre-orders for the next Nintendo system. Nintendo planned to ship 300,000 units. That is 20% of the total pre-orders. Yeah.
Shocked.
Backward compatibility would add another $75 to the price tag, which was already projected to be $250. Now, by the time they actually launched the thing, they went with $199. But still, suffice it to say, they could have added in backward compatibility. They intended to. That was originally on the list of specs that President Yamauchi said this machine needs to have. But it's the one thing they couldn't put in without massively raising the price. And since they've got this competition starting to breathe down their necks now, they can't necessarily go for that. So they opted not to. The argument they made was that they thought the consumer public was starting to get savvy enough to where they could make the distinction. This is like CDs versus cassettes. The newer technology completely replaces the old one. So you don't need to worry about things not being backwards compatibility because people can accept that now. So that shouldn't be a problem. Super Mario 4 was rushed into production to launch with the system. Miyamoto, without going too much into what we're going to talk about next week on the show, Miyamoto had some new ideas for this one. He finally got a chance to put the dinosaur character into it that he wanted to. But ultimately, he was still worried that the game itself, as it was too similar to what he'd done before. So Sega, Super Nintendo was going to launch without backwards compatibility. Meanwhile, the Mega Drive, or the Genesis as it was called in America, already was backwards compatible and had a power-based converter, which was arguably the most touted but least bought accessory for the system. But at least they could say, hey, our thing is backwards compatible, which they had every intention of using against Nintendo in this fight. So one of the questions for the panel, where do you stand on backwards compatibility? Because for a while, with modern consoles even, this was kind of a concern, whether the new thing coming out was going to be backwards compatible or not. Whereas now I think we've kind of gotten to a place where we just kind of expect it's not going to be.
And I think that's kind of a shame. I know it takes extra hardware, and I do not claim to understand the science of the things. I just play the games. But I don't know. If it costs more, that's fine. I think people should be allowed to play their old games on Xbox and PlayStation. I think it's... I mean, does Wii U still play GameCube?
It doesn't do GameCube, but it does Wii.
It does Wii,
so you
yeah.
can play regular Wii games in the Wii U.
I think that's important. I think, especially for Nintendo, because for a while, everyone thought the Wii U was like an add-on, but it wasn't.
Right.
And the PS3 used to be backwards compatible, right?
They took it
I
out.
have one.
At first,
you have the fat. You have the
Yeah.
George Foreman group.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, it's typically one of the first things to get removed once they get later in the life cycle and need to start bumping the price down.
Including the
Right.
Wii. The original Wii stopped playing GameCube games
Yep.
I have
later in the
I have mine plays
I have a launch
GameCube.
version, so it has GameCube
Yeah,
compatibility.
so do I.
Yeah.
But I like it. But then again, that's just me being selfish, and probably so I don't have to. I don't feel upset that I have, because obviously money's tight. So if I buy a system, obviously I'm going to buy a limited number of games, and I want to be able to maybe go back and play my games on my new system, so I can have more stuff to do, so I can pawn off my old system and have a little more spending cash to buy more games, and
Yeah.
I definitely see a future with backwards compatibility being less about rebuying something and, hey, you had a Sony PlayStation 5 and you bought this title, and it's going to be in the cloud, so when you buy PlayStation 6, you can play your 5 games because you already bought it. Like, I see that as being a possible future because you're staying in the same software ecosystem, right? It's not like you're going from iTunes to Google Play or, you know what I'm saying, where it's a completely different platform. As long as you stay on the platform, technology is going to start to catch up with that. I think Nintendo is actually, at least in current times, the one that's feeling the most pain in this area, because they do continue to re-offer games that have come out year over year over year over year. And they're like, oh, I remember when the Wii U first came out with the Wii compatibility, and then they were like, oh, on 3DS, if you want to get this game, it's 50 cents or $1 or whatever for, like, Mario 1. And people were like, really? You're going to seriously recharge me for a game I just bought?
Yeah.
Like, I own 7 copies of Super Mario World. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Or all the stuff you bought on the first Wii.
Right, and look at Nintendo. Obviously, it's not helping their bottom line much. So,
No.
as far as I'm concerned, I do see a future where the technology will catch up with it, and backwards compatibility won't be an issue.
You're talking. You were talking about earlier about how Nintendo could revitalize the system. I still believe Nintendo could possibly go under in 10 years.
If they keep the current pace, sure, it's a risk with any company.
I don't feel like they're going to change their basically business model enough, because they're so traditional in the way they do things. And
but look how it worked out for Sega, who didn't go traditional. So maybe they have a leg to stand on if you're going by the history listed here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but this was also different. This was a different time, and also Sega was always.
I know, but that's the crapshoot of business. You never know.
I mean, after the Saturn, Sega was just doomed. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
No,
sorry.
it's legit. It's legit.
All right. You know what? I'm not going to... I've got it on the agenda here, but I think that would make a really good DLC, so how about we just hold off on our official supply?
I think that's a good idea. Held.
Okay. Next up, marketing campaigns. As we mentioned off the top, Sega came out with a whole series of marketing campaigns to target teens specifically. So these are just some of the things they came up with. The Graduate to Genesis campaign, where they'd offer a free third-party game with a console purchase. So you get the system, you get a packed-in game, plus you get a free third-party game too, which I'm sure only helped their relationships with the third parties. Genesis does what Nintendo don't, which we've already mentioned, but a direct challenge, taking the advertising campaign to directly confront Nintendo. Humans Against Genesis, which was a campaign, lesser known campaign, where this old woman, a biddy, denounces Sonic for being too fast. He
I actually remember
thumbs
that.
his nose
Which is
I do
weird.
too.
Yeah.
That's too fast.
Project Rolling Thunder, which was just kind of an internal thing that they called it, but it's outlined in the book. Basically, there's this salesman ad where it's kind of shot in first person. You see this kid that's looking at these two TVs. One's got Sega, has Sonic on it. The other one has Super Mario World on it. And the salesman's trying to sell him on Super Mario World, and the kid keeps saying, "Well, I want to look at that one because it's faster and all this other sort of stuff." So, but that was kind of a big deal because they were actually using the competitor's product in their ad. Mm-hmm. So they kind of knew that the Sega of America team came up with this. They kind of knew they'd run into some resistance with it over in Japan. So they came up with this idea of Rolling Thunder, where they put it in heavy rotation up front, with the idea that at some point it was going to get pulled. So they put it in hard rotation first, with like a little bit after the fact, if it makes it that far, expecting that as soon as Sega of Japan found out about it, they'd freak out and pull the ad and all that, which didn't end up happening. Actually, they were okay with it. Jimbo Madison, who was the Sega guy, who basically the ad agency had the idea to just have him scream Sega.
Oh, yeah. Sega!
Yeah. So they had him they had him in for a voice.
I love that guy.
They had him in for a voiceover session, and they just had him scream as many variations as he could all day long. I just think it was interesting. A guy got paid to do that. Welcome to the Next Level, which was not just an ad, but was a philosophy for the company going forward once they got this new advertising agency, which pitched them on the concept, which Sega of America loved. Blast processing, which was a made-up term for burst mode, which basically means that Genesis could process code faster due to this routine that was in there. It has absolutely nothing to do with graphics. It's just something that Genesis had that SNES didn't, and it became a big marketing bludgeon because of that they could further beat Nintendo with. So just open floor on this one. Any response to any of these campaigns that you remember? We already mentioned you remember the Humans Against Genesis.
I do remember the Welcome to the Next Level campaign particularly. I mean, it was in everything, and that was back when video game magazines were really, really big, and they advertised the crap out of that.
Well, that was part of a big push they made over the summer of '91, where they had was originally the 16 Weeks of Sega, which turned into 102 Days of Sega because they had a deal with KISS 102.7 FM out in LA, who was... they were getting mentions, and they were holding contests, and they had some a tie-in with Blockbuster with the rental system there, and they had all of this through the whole summer.
Blockbuster.
They were pushing really hard on all of these different things. They had the Sega World Tour.
Yeah.
They had a mall tour where they had these buses going from mall to mall with letting kids play Genesis and get it in their hands.
Yeah, and it's really when I finally got a Genesis, I was early teens, preteen, early teen, and I definitely remember feeling like, because all my other friends had Super Nintendos, and I just remember feeling like you're playing the kiddie system, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I felt that way then, and I really think. Plus, they were an underdog, and I've always been an underdog kind of guy. I'm like, well, they're like, I'm playing Super Mario World or whatever, and I'm like, who gives a rat's flying about that? I'm playing blah blah blah, and. It was just that tension was created. So in that sense, I think from a marketing perspective, Sega did a brilliant job of what has now metastasized into Nintendo's only for kids, and if you want to play real games, you're going to play Sony and all these other systems. So it started there, and I remember being a part of that and feeling originally like, oh, I really like Nintendo, but now that you mention it, it is kind of like Mario just hits bricks and gets power-ups. Who cares? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like... That's weird. I never really thought of that until now, but that definitely was in the mindset.
Yeah.
I've always hated like marketing where it's obvious, clear second place, trying to chomp at the first. Like Samsung does it horribly with their stupid Apple ads and stuff, and Apple did it too with PC ads. I'm a Mac and I'm a PC. I've hated that stuff. I think it's so
Apples were very clever.
So cheesy. Why would you insult the user base of the people you're trying to convert? It doesn't make any sense. Like, you're stupid. Buy our product. Like, what? You just called me stupid. Why would I do that? I've never liked it. I think it's really lame. But it does have a point, especially with kids. I'm sure with schoolyard recess.
Oh, it worked.
Like,
I was like, I don't play Nintendo. I'm too cool for that.
Right.
Yeah. And I could totally see people today with Sony and Xbox, or at least in the original iteration.
Sure there are kids.
I got a PlayStation. What do you got? Nintendo, you're stupid.
I was just about to say, I'm sure there are kids today that have that exact same thing.
Legitimately was a victim of something like that.
I thought you were going to say you were that guy walking around going, you suck because
when PlayStation came out, I was made fun of for playing Sonic the Hedgehog. So
I feel your pain on that.
So yeah, I get that, and it eventually prompted me to get one of the reasons why I got a Super Nintendo, a Sony PlayStation was for that specific reason.
Yep, I got it.
Another was a game I played at a person's house, but that's another story.
Okay, so next up we want to talk about the advent of the worldwide street date.
Love that game. Shh.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Yuji Naka, the creator of Sonic, wanted some recognition for his
Everybody
efforts.
in their ego, man.
Well, I mean, he
Everyone's,
God,
he went to the
like
mat.
Brad.
He went to the mat with Sonic 1. So when he was making Sonic 1, he made a black-on-black screen with creator credits on it because he thought that game designers should, and not just designers too, like his entire team. But he thought they deserved some recognition for their efforts. So he put this screen at the end of Sonic 1, which is black text on a black screen, just so they could have a credit screen, just like in the movies, because he thought they deserved credit the same way. He quit Sega because he didn't feel he was being treated well enough over there. He was convinced to come to America and work with a team over here to make Sonic 2. So he came to the Sega Technical Instrument Institute, which was run by Mark Cerny at the time, with Sonic Team in order to start working on Sonic 2. During the development of Sonic 2, there was yet another fight between Sega of America and Sega of Japan over the name of Tails, as we call them in the U.S., or miles per hour as they prefer in Japan.
It sounds so British. Miles per hour.
It's just random.
It's like stupid.
Yeah.
What? It's miles per hour.
Yeah.
I know. But
What?
No.
That's awesome. I think that's very. I don't. Oh, you guys suck. Anyway.
Then everyone would call him Mup.
Mup. Well, I Miles Tails per hour. That's his official name.
Yeah, and
so
that's the concession they eventually made was that Tails would be the nickname.
Yeah.
It's what stuck. Instant.
Well, yeah, of course.
So, but
You
all
put
of this
two
is
tails on a fox.
all of this is building towards Sonic Tuesday. Get it? It's a 2, like a numeral 2. Doesn't really work in podcast format, but if you could, anyway.
We'll take a picture and post it.
It was the first global launch set for November of 1992, which was a huge, infrastructure challenge. Just getting all of everything to stores on time and all of that, and trying to organize the whole thing was this struggle. Sonic Team actually got airline tickets delivered to them 6 months in advance to New York for the launch, basically saying, here, finish the game on time, which I just thought was interesting. Sega of Japan broke ranks. They decided they wanted to launch on the Saturday before, which, caused a little bit of more friction.
Sega's done that
Sega.
a number of times where they just go, you know what, F it, it's out today. And everyone's like, what? Like, didn't one of those like Saturn or something? It was like, it's out right now.
Oh, we'll get there.
Okay,
Yeah, well-
it's just it's such a weird.
We shall get there.
I think it's
Hopefully, we're starting to run out of
Yeah,
time on
about
the
to
podcast.
say, is this going to be a two-parter?
Hopefully not. So they spun it into being a sneak preview. Later on, Sonic 3 wasn't ready in time for Christmas. It was too big. It was one last game on the Genesis. Naka wanted it to be his best yet. It was 24 megs, which was huge.
I love that. That's so funny.
It's so funny now.
Yes, at the time was huge. They had a Happy Meal deal for the first half of 1994 for that Sonic 3. So they had to either cut down the game or lose the promotion. They came up with the idea to split the game via hardware add-on.
Horrible idea.
So the Knuckles content was in the plug-in cart, and then the original Sonic 3.
Yeah, but
Horrible.
that was some cool little tech.
It was
though.
neat, but horrible.
But so all of that so they could make the actual release date. So the question for the panel briefly here, worldwide launches or regional rollouts, does it matter to you?
So I was thinking, like Nintendo, right? This is the one thing that Nintendo gamers lament the most is, why does Japan get all the games and we don't get anything? Because
Yeah.
they release everything in Japan first, and then, like Xenogears, or Xenoblade Chronicles, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
You were waiting, and then finally at the end of the life cycle of the system, they're like, maybe we should release this. Really? Like, if you'd have done it before, you'd have sold 1 million copies. If you'd have plugged in the marketing with the promotional bucket that you used in Japan, but they don't. And very rarely does Nintendo do worldwide releases. Rarely.
Nintendo's the only one, I think, that still does regionals.
And they do region lock. I mean,
Region
region
lock
lock,
is
which is
awful.
horrible, with the
Yeah.
exception of Amiibo. I mean, Amiibo's not region locked, but it's a real challenge for them, I think.
In their defense, which I don't think it is truly defensible, but you have to go through like all these European censors, and there's all these different things to
Yeah.
releasing something. So if it's ready, literally you could go at any second in one region, and it's literally months or years away in another region. There's no reason to wait for a worldwide launch. You're literally just sitting on what could be making you tons of money.
And interestingly, that is the strategy that has worked so well for them from a sustainability standpoint for so long, particularly in the quality realm and release dates. That's why
Yeah.
there's the infamous Nintendo drought. You're like, oh crap, Japan's had it for 2 years and now we're getting it. Why does it take so long?
yeah.
And, it's a resource thing, but I think to your point, the regulatory environment in a lot of areas of the world is very challenging.
Like
So
in
why
Brazil
go
in
there?
particular, Nintendo just pulled out
They
of
just
Brazil
pulled out
because
entirely 'cause of
tax
taxes,
reasons and
which is hilarious.
Yeah.
Sucks to
Right.
be Brazil.
That's why they should just drop regions. I think other consoles have done it successfully. I would have totally gotten a
I
new
don't know,
3DS
though, because
months
if you
ago
look at,
if
but if
that
you
were
look,
the case.
I know, but if you look at some of the other big publishers, their games suck.
This is true.
Worldwide release, Assassin's Creed, pick your title.
Oh, here we go.
I'm about to say, how many
Horrible.
times is he going to say this?
Horrible.
But that is a fair point, though. It's
EA's
because
the
they
same
were
way.
because they were rushing towards a worldwide relaunch. They did have to get Assassin's Creed out that holiday season, and because of that, it wasn't ready, which we've talked about many, many times before. But that's the problem with a worldwide launch. Sometimes when you set a date for something.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
alrighty. Next up, talking about violence in video games.
Love it.
Da-da-da-da. Sorry.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat
Love it.
was available same day, both consoles. It was the first time that gamers actually had to make a choice as to which version of it they wanted to get.
Everybody wanted blood and guts.
Yeah.
So Sega released it as is, favoring in their minds artistic freedom because they thought it was more important that it reflect the way the gamers designed it. Nintendo censored the blood, replaced it with gray sweat because they didn't want.
Boring.
They're shooting for their. So I already know where the discussion topic's going on this one, so we can just skip Kyle. Congressional hearings on violence came up a little bit later on, where Mortal Kombat
Here we
and
go.
Night Trap became two of the biggest pinatas. Nintendo basically said, "We're not the problem. We're the Disney of video games." This guy,
Largely true.
this guy over here has been calling us the Disney of video games in their ads for years now. So
Yep.
we're squeaky clean.
Yep.
All of this eventually led to, through several other iterations, eventually led to the creation of the ESRB, where the industry decided to police themselves.
Which I think is fine.
So
Sure.
they have to they have to submit everything to, and this is just another hoop to jump through before releases. Now is that they need to send it off for certification
Better
first
that
before
than
they can
some
release it.
stupid government panel.
Yeah.
Which still happens anyway.
It happens
But
in like the UK and Australia and
wait,
other places.
and
yeah.
you know what though? Can we? Okay, I'll wait till you get to the question, Rob.
I've just one more quick thing. Moving forward, one of the ideas they came up with to deal with this sort of thing that Sega of America was discussing was having something like a blood code, where you can have your cake and eat it too. It's not the standard version of the game is
Pen clicking
quote
in my
unquote.
ear.
Sorry about that.
In case everyone wonders, that's not static or feedback. It's Rob.
So you can have your cake and eat it too. You can the game is fine as is. It passes all of the regulatory hurdles that it needs to, but kids can figure out the code and put it in, and then they get it the way that the gamers designed it.
I remember that.
So which was the better version?
Oh, clearly it was the Sega. version.
Sega.
And
I'm gonna say the arcade version.
Oh,
I mean,
you're so clever.
from the mentality of the two parties that play here, who do you side with?
Look, I mean, I think it was this is so weird. I really think the Genesis version was the right version, and it really did open up the doors to the kinds of games that we have today. Because if you think about it, there would never have been something like Call of Duty if it had been the Nintendo version. You'd have shot somebody and been like, "Thuh, thuh." It would have been a non-realistic, fake.
You get a little
Or
puff
you
of
just-
air.
little
Like
holes.
shoot him with ink and you
Yeah.
turn into a octopus.
which is
Well,
coming. Which
that's
is coming. But look,
I know.
Insert Wilhelm scream. You know.
oh my god! But I think that, and again, back to it. This is another example, and this keeps coming up. It came up again in the '90s, and it came up again in the early 2000s about violence in video games making our children murderers and terrorists. Ridiculous. People have enough good sense to pick stuff for them that works for them, and quit telling everybody what to do. There's ratings on it,
Absolutely.
which is totally legit. Everybody just back off. Like, I'm so tired. That is, it's really close to censorship, in my opinion. The old censorship back in the 40s and 50s on TV when they put black bars over everything because, oh my God, that's too much. You can't see a popped collar on a woman. Dear sweet baby Jesus.
She's showing too much ankle.
I mean, my God. And unfortunately back then, they mostly were cankles. I'm just saying.
Cankles.
But come on, like, why? But like, if you want to go out and you want to spend your money and you want blood and guts and your parents approve it, shut up. If I put the label on it and I lawfully protected myself from
See
things
this
that weren't
little
very-
M here? That means 17 and older.
Moving on. You know what I mean? Like, just everybody needs to back off. And if there's one more damn congressional hearing about video game violence, I'm going to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
Well, I
if
think
you don't
we
want your
know
10-year-old to
whole
play
point.
mature content, don't give them mature content.
Seriously.
Pay the hell attention.
And yeah,
Seriously.
do kids nowadays want the blood and guts sooner and earlier and earlier and earlier? Of course
Sure.
they do, because that's the marketing is going that way.
Right.
But then that means, I don't know, gee, be a parent and stand up and make a decision. Ugh.
I mean, my parents took GoldenEye away from me because they thought that was too violent for me, and the only bloody part of it really was just the little specks and the
Which I love.
screen.
I love all that because back in the 80s, Disney, the great and wonderful Walt Disney Company, had blood in cartoon movies. And we've talked about this before. So I don't understand why everybody got all soft all of a sudden about, oh my God, I can't have blood in anything in front of my children.
It's because of the 80s. It was the Christian right,
Oh
Ronald
my-
Reagan.
Yeah, but that was
rebirth.
at like the late 80s though. Like, so it's just like, ugh.
Okay.
It's all about the kids.
Coming up next, talking about bridging console generations. Ultimately, when it came down to it, in terms of extending the current generation and moving on to the next, Nintendo tended to favor software because they would do things like Mode 7 and SFX chip.
Which was great in Final Fantasy series later on.
Yeah.
The 3.6.
Where you're building things into the actual, there's an extra chip in the actual cartridge itself, but it's based on the software. Whereas as opposed to Sega's approach, which was more along the lines of hardware, of you got the Sega CD and it was all peripherals. And 32X was the same way too. One of the other ones that Nintendo came up with, in addition to Mode 7 and SFX, was advanced computer modeling. And this was detailed in Console Wars, the book, which I thought was relatively interesting, so I wanted to share. Rare had been working on a game to crush Sega. This is Nintendo starting to fight back about 93, 94, graphics-wise. They chose Donkey Kong as the mascot to provide, since he was the first big
Video
console
game character.
character. So they wanted him to be the one to lead the charge. They needed a walled-off area where they could work in private on this secret upcoming game because the mood at the time was kind of people would wander up and, hey, what you doing? Everybody coming up and looking over your shoulder and trying to see what everybody else is working on. So they needed a walled-off area that they could work in private, which turned into the Nintendo Treehouse.
Which is much beloved today.
Which nowadays is mainly their localization arm, the NOA localization arm. It was shown to the NOA president at the time. He thought it was an Ultra 64 game. He thought it was a game for the new console instead of still being on the SNES. They ordered 4 million units for launch, which we talked about them shorting on orders. They ordered 4 million. They usually order 1 million for a AAA title. So they went bonkers on DKC and marketed the crap out of it.
Rightfully so.
Yeah. So that was how they were working to extend things farther than what might have normally been the console's life cycle. Because at this point, Genesis had been going for a good long while.
Yeah.
both of them tried to make deals with Sony when they were looking forward to their next console experience. Nintendo had a deal to produce an add-on to the SNES. Yamauchi broke the deal, basically because he was concerned over Sony, because they already had control over the software due to a licensing agreement they'd set up back in '88, and they were also producing the audio chip for this add-on too, or for the SNES actually, I should say. So he was worried about them having too much pull over this console. They also had some recent acquisitions that made him nervous. CBS Records, Columbia TriStar Pictures, because now they're not just a hardware creator, they're creating content too. So he didn't like the idea of them having too many eggs in the same basket. So he decided to break the deal. He decided to go with Philips instead. Sony found out during the Nintendo press conference at Summer CES 1991.
Horrible.
They found out on stage. This was the first they'd heard about it. Sony decided to move forward with the PlayStation console on their own, but they needed software. They looked to Sega. Again, the deal fell apart due to various disagreements. They decided to move forward on their own. How might things have turned out differently had one of those two deals gone through?
There'd be an empire.
The alliance between Sony and Sega, or Sony and Nintendo.
I think Nintendo's dark predictions would have come true. I think Sony would have been so pushy and so controlling. It's one of those things where maybe some people like an alternate future where Sony, PlayStation, Nintendo were all together. But I'm so thankful that they didn't, because
I agree.
No offense to Sony now, but they're obviously in really bad financial trouble.
Right.
Their content creation is garbage, whether it's movies or video games. Hardly anything good first-party Sony software or even content through all of Sony is coming out at all. They just have really bad managerial decisions and content decisions. I don't know. I'm not a fan
for their
at all.
games. I mean, everything was third party.
Yeah, just about on the PlayStation. Yeah,
for everything.
Yeah.
Sony, PlayStation.
and their first-party games aren't even that great. I mean, Crash Bandicoot is no Mario,
Which we'll talk about next week.
Yeah, but I mean, they've never had
Keep
fantastic games.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I totally agree with you, and I don't think that if it had ultimately worked at the time, and they were a monster, so they totally would have bullied Nintendo around.
Oh yeah, Sony in the '90s compared to now would have been
the Walkman. Need I say more? And then and the same thing with Sega. So I think both companies were right to kind of give them the stiff arm and say, thanks, but no thanks.
I honestly think everyone won out in the end. Sony's better off because of it. Nintendo's better off because of it.
I mean, Sega not so much, but
Philips clearly. But
well, yeah.
Well, they had their own issues that led to that, which
sure.
arguably we'll get to next.
Yep.
Eventually, and this is kind of where the story ends for Tom Kalinske. This isn't necessarily where the story ends for Sega, although there are definitely some things here that become suspicious later on based on what we know of what happened with Sega eventually. But eventually it was a breakdown between SOA and SOJ, or rather Kalinske and Sega of Japan. Sonic and Genesis were runaway hits in the U.S. They had 50% of the market share. Versus 15% of the market in Japan. And Kalinske always kind of felt like there was a little bit of jealousy there from Japan because they could never make it work as well over there as they could here. Japan was still pretty much owned by Nintendo. Nintendo had all of these strategic partnerships with all these Japanese companies that would keep them loyal to them. And then there was the rush launch of the Sega Saturn.
Horrible.
Launched for $399.
Ouch.
The original idea was to have two consoles, basically. Project Mars, which was a 32-bit add-on for the Genesis, which ended up becoming the 32X, and Project Saturn, which was a 32-bit full console. The Genesis was still selling well, but the new console was coming anyway, despite they were looking to shorten the lifespan, which didn't make sense to Sega of America at the time. Mm-hmm. They were under pressure from PlayStation coming up with their, starting to get their deals together, and they were working out things with third parties, with getting their software up for their launch. And the first E3 bumped up the U.S. launch by 4 months, and that was kind of the I think the straw that broke the camel's back for Tom Kalinske in his time at Sega, was that they're working on this thing. It didn't make sense to him at the time because Nintendo's coming out with 64 bits. We're still doing 32 anyway.
Right.
We Sega. And then on top of that, they were planning all this stuff for this big launch coming up. All of the machinations that need to go in place for a worldwide launch. And the president comes to you and says, "We're launching it in 4 months." We're launching it 4 months early. We're telling everybody about it at E3 and we're launching it 4 months early. We're like, we can't do that. That's not a good idea, sir. So, and then on top of that, they go to E3, and the final nail in the coffin is Steve Race, who was a former employee of Sega of America. He worked with Tom Kalinske, who is now president of Sony Entertainment of America. Gets on stage, has the shortest speech ever in the history of E3. I don't know that for a fact, but it has to be. Gets on stage for the press conference, says $299, walks off stage. Because he knew that's all people cared about.
Right.
Was the price point that the PlayStation was going to launch
I
at.
still think that's all people do care about.
Yeah,
it always
absolutely.
comes down to
Yeah.
price. As evidenced by the PlayStation 3.
People aren't making money.
And even the
you know?
Xbox One this last holiday was
Absolutely.
beating PS4 because it was $70 cheaper.
Sure.
Yep.
Has nothing to do with it being a better system, better games, anything. It's literally just the sticker.
Yep.
Yep.
And that's why the Wii was so successful. 'Cause
Absolutely.
It was so much cheaper.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the... I mean,
And
part of it with
eventually the
motion
Wii U will
controls
be
and
too.
stuff.
But it'll be...
Well, the Wii U is this expensive... That's why the Wii U is like the exception, not the
Yeah.
rule.
But-
It's not
and I
selling well
think-
and it's really expensive.
And I think the price will drop.
They have to.
Soon.
It needs to be $199
And I'm-
before they sell.
And I
more
think
Wii
and I
Us.
think they will, when they get closer to E3, we'll see a big announcement.
Just
on
stop
it.
packing in games, make it $200. Yeah,
Boom.
bam, you're up to 15 million by the end of the year. Like,
Seriously.
So all of this kind of ended up. This was about the end of Tom Kalinsche's tenure at Sega of America, and the end of the book, since this book is about his tenure at Sega of America. So
how about that?
Yeah. So I mean, after all of this, after all the friction he had with the Japanese arm of the company, despite having a lot of ideas and a lot of campaigns that managed to take Sega, to a substantial market share in the U.S. They made up a lot of ground over here, and still ultimately it was Japan's show. And that kind of rankled, I think, a little bit on him. So he got a chance to go back and finish his family vacation that he was pulled away from by President Nakayama at the beginning of the book. And that's where we leave things. Just real quick, as we have 2 minutes to round out this podcast. Lightning round. Pole position. Going around the table, what was your favorite Genesis game?
Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which I consider the same game.
Okay. That's fair. I think that's fair.
Bradley.
I really liked this one's a tie, but all the Disney platformers. We talked about
Oh,
it
yeah.
briefly.
Yeah,
but
we did talk about that.
Aladdin was
Aladdin was
fantastic.
good.
What was your favorite?
Probably Aladdin.
Yeah,
I liked
Aladdin.
Lion King a lot. I didn't own Pocahontas because I'm not a girl.
I'd actually say Lion King is a
Sure
close
about that?
second for me
Lion King's really good.
It was good.
after the
But
Sonic series.
Aladdin's the number one
Yeah.
for me.
And for me, it was Shinobi 3.
Ooh.
Because the music was the bomb in that game.
Never played it.
Shinobi's another
You can
series
get a
they need to
virtual
bring back.
console. On any Wii Up, you can get on Virtual Console.
Oh, sweet.
For like $2.
Oh,
It's
awesome.
a
On
great
3DS, I think.
Yeah, great game.
Yeah. My experience is a little more limited in the Genesis realm because I was purely a Nintendo kid, but
Yeah, I never
think
owned
I
a
have to go.
Genesis, I should say.
Yeah, I think I have to go with Echo the Dolphin. Just
Oh,
'cause it
yeah.
was
The
so
original.
It was so different from anything else. It was just completely
Very
out of left field.
atmosphere was heavy in that game. That was really cool.
Yeah, Nicholas.
And now, to send us off, like I do every episode, you can check us out on so many different platforms, but hey, iTunes and iHeartRadio, you're rocking it. Like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter at GamerFeed Radio. We already said the email at the top of the show, so get it. And then you can hit us up on Twitch, and now we're doing DLC videos on YouTube. Boom. That's all I got.
Under the Wire.
Drop the bass.